Welcome to another edition of Dan Frequently Asked Questions. In this edition, we'll be discussing neck fracture and fusion and return to diving. Keep watching. We got a question from a diver who relatively recently had received surgery, essentially dealing with a fracture between the fourth and the seventh cervical vertebrae. And now we're planning to do a dive trip in the Philippines and wanted to know how they could go about not being suspended from diving and do a return to diving safely. Well, this is quite a big question, so I'll need to break it down into a couple of parts. First of all, one needs to deal with the neck fracture. Neck fractures are significant events. They can result in paralysis. They may be the result of a head injury and a motor vehicle accident. So it's not merely the vertebrae and the way they were fixed and whether it's stable, but whether there were any concurrent injuries that are involved. If it was a degenerative condition, in other words, where the discs between the vertebrae were so worn out that the vertebrae started compressing the nerves leaving the spine, causing symptoms typically in the arms and sometimes in the legs, then the surgery that one would have would be more benign in the first place. And secondly, the stability of the vertebrae would not really be the issue. So the first thing I'm going to put on the table is one needs to ensure that the neck fracture is stable. And that usually takes at least 6 weeks to 6 months, depending on what procedure has been used. Did they use screws? Did they use rods? Did they use intervertebral prosthesis? Did they introduce cadaver bone? What did they use essentially to fuse the vertebrae and stabilize the vertebral fracture or displacement? The next aspect is the issue of fitness. Now, if you are a recreational diver, you are not actually obligated to get another diving medical after you've had your original certification. Hold on, by no means am I saying that you don't ever need another diving medical examination. What I'm saying is there is no specific demand that you need to get a follow-up diving medical. However, we do recommend that divers should undergo general physical examinations, typically every 4 years under the age of 40 and every 2 years above the age of 40, particularly paying attention to lifestyle issues and cardiovascular related risk factors. Those usually are the greatest concerns. So it is wise to undergo a diving medical. However, the diving medical insistence usually comes from the training agency, if you're doing another dive course, or the dive operator that wants you to sign a waiver that includes asking you about whether you have an underlying medical condition or not. And it would really be that which would trigger the question, are you fit to dive? And of course, one would need to be able to answer that, typically with a doctor's note. So here's what I would recommend. First of all, I think it's too soon after your surgery for you to return to diving. However, what I would suggest for an individual who has had neck surgery and has waited an adequate amount of time that an orthopedic surgeon essentially declares them able to return to normal activities of daily living, to then undergo a diving medical assessment in which the orthopedic surgeon's report and a diving medical assessment are combined in saying that the individual is not at undue risk when undergoing scuba diving exposures. Bear in mind, of course, bumpy boat rides and other potential risk factors, and also the bending of the neck when you are diving that may also strain the neck in unusual ways and particularly be a problem with neck surgery. However, again, if you have those two documents, the orthopedic surgeon or neurosurgeon's note saying all is well, and a diving doctor saying that there is no condition prohibiting you from diving, then that should be adequate if you go for a diving event, an excursion, to provide the operator with adequate reassurance that you do not have a disqualifying condition from returning to diving. I hope that's addressed the question behind the question, and I hope you get resolved quickly enough that you may indeed return back to diving. And until next time, safe diving.